Happy Mother's Day. Hi, my name is Jeanette and I want to thank you for joining me on the channel Jane Reads. So today I am doing the Mama Bear book tag. This was originally created by Taylor from Tales and Treats with Tay. And then I saw Amanda from Book Lover Amanda do it, so I will link both their videos below. And they said in their videos for mothers or to honor your mother. Well, I am not a mother. And then I looked at my posting schedule and I was like, oh, I would like to have a video for May the 10th. And May the 10th is the Friday of Mother's Day weekend. Mother's Day in Canada is technically the Sunday, but the Friday before. So I thought, well, what a great timing. Because at first I was like, I'm not going to do this video because I'm not a mother. But then I rewatched the intro to their video and they said about, you could honor your mother if you're not a mother or a person that is a mother figure to you. And I thought, well, I can do that. And since both my mother and my mother-in-law are both readers now, I thought, well, this is perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to dive right into the questions. And so I am going to share a book, like answer each question with a book for my mom and for my mother-in-law. So every question will have 2 books until we get to the end. And you'll understand why when we get to the end. Okay, so question number 1 is a book cover that is mostly their favorite color. So I had to ask my mom what her favorite color was because I wasn't really sure. And she said burgundy or beige, but she doesn't really have one. I was like, okay, well that explains why I didn't really know offhand what it was. And so I pulled The Secret Keepers of Old Depot Grocery by Amanda Cox for the beige color. I had set a couple books aside and said to my husband, which one do you think is more beige? And he chose this one. So this is the one I'm going with. And so this is considered, it is dual timeline. We are following historical, does it say when it, so we start with present day. Then we go June 1965, and then, so the 2 timelines. I feel like we're following 3, but the 2 timelines for sure. And we are following a grandmother, her daughter, and her granddaughter. So 3 generations of women from this family. And it's kind of perfect because my grandfather, my mom's father, they had a produce stand at a farmer's market, so he was considered a fresh grocer in England. So it's like groceries, so it's not quite the same, but my mom had shared memories of assisting her parents for their produce stand and stuff at a farmer's market, and so I'm like, this works perfectly. And I have recommended this book to my mom, and she has read it, so yeah. Okay, so anyways, so that is the first book. Book number 2 for this is my mother-in-law is Ruth, and her favorite color is blue. My most blue cover is A Distant Shore by Karen Kingsbury. This is romantic suspense, and we are following, what is her name? Eliza, who is stuck in a human trafficking. And then we meet Jack, who meets Eliza while he's trying to stop this human trafficking ring and we're following that story. And this was the very first Karen Kingsbury book I read, and I really enjoyed the story. Okay, then the second question is a book published in the year they were born. Okay. So this was really hard because my mom was born early 1950-ish, like in the early 1950s. And I went through a list of books that were published in around the year she was born and asked her, have you read this? Have you read this? Do you know this? And I learned that my mother was not a reader when she was younger, which really shocked me to learn because we always grew up with books at home. But she was not a reader and didn't really get into reading until retirement. And I don't know how did not know that. I guess because I was always surrounded by books, but apparently it was because of my father. And so he was the reader in the family. And so it kind of, which totally makes sense to me because I take after my father in a lot of things. So that really made sense when she said that. And so then I was like, well, did you read this? Surely you read to me as a kid. And she's like, well, I remember buying those books for you, but you read them. I'm like, oh, okay. So the book that it's a series is The Famous Five by Enid Blyton, I think is how you pronounce the author's name. And so the book that was published in the year my mother was born is book number 10. And this is Five on a Hike Together. I do not remember anything about the story. But we are following 5 kids who it says mystery, it's a classic. So I'm thinking like Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys type of story. For this one, it says, when Dick is awoken by a light flashing through his window, he is puzzled. Is someone trying to send him a coded message? And when the famous 5 hear of an escaped convict in the area, they are on red alert. The police won't help, so the 5 have no choice. Yet again, they'll be solving this mystery by themselves. So yeah, that is the one book that I found that was published in the year my mom was born. Okay, then for my mother-in-law, again, I went with one that I recognize, that I know I probably read as a kid. Again, I don't remember it a lot, but I'm like, I know I read this series as a kid. And so that book, my mother-in-law was born late 1940s, so only a few years before my mother. And the one that was published the year she was born is The Island Stallion by Walter Farley. This is book number 4 in the Black Stallion series. And I remember reading The Black Stallion and talking with my mom and stuff. Most likely, I read all the books. Because then there's another book that was also released the same year, which is also written by Enid Blyton, and that is Third Year at Mallory Towers. And again, it features a horse. Not surprising, I was obsessed with horses as a kid. So I don't remember this one as much as I remember reading The Black Stallion, but I'm positive I would have read it. And since my mother was familiar with Enid Blyton and said, like, you know, you read a lot of her books, most likely I read this one. And this is book number 3 in the Mallory Towers series. And it says, Daryl and her friends grow together as they share their school days. There are new students to induct, sporting matches to be won, tempers to control, and tricks to play on teachers. This work presents stories about life at boarding school as readers follow the girls' lives through 6 years at Mallory Towers. So those are the 2 books published late 1940s, early 1950s that I most likely read as a kid from my mother and mother-in-law's birth years. Question number 3 is, a book set in their favorite season or the season they were born. Okay, so my mom said her favorite season is fall and spring. And my mother was born early November. So I'm like, okay, trying to think, what books do I have that are from that set in that time period? And I did come across one, and right in the front it says Monday, November. Okay, perfect. So Critical Threat by Lynette Eason. This is book number 3 of her Extreme Measures series. I have read this and reviewed it on this channel. And we are following a FBI special agent who tracks serial killers, and then the male character is a psychiatrist whose father is in prison for being a serial killer. And when some clues lead to a possible copycat, and so Grace and the psychiatrist end up working together to try to figure out what's going on. Lynette Easton, I really enjoyed this story. It keeps you guessing, but I'm not going to say any more because it is book 3 of a series, and we met Grace in book 1. Okay? Then for my mother-in-law, she is born in July, early July. And I just very recently finished reading this one, and so my review will already be up on the channel. And this would be in my April wrap-up. And this one is set early summer, like kind of really mainly July, because one of the events that they go to is July 4th. So yes, so The Saturday Night Supper Club by Carla Lorando. This is a contemporary romance. We are following Rachel Bishop, who was a chef at a restaurant, but due to something that happened, she gets let go, bought out from that job, and she ends up meeting Alex, who basically is the one that caused the events to happen in her life, not on purpose. He didn't know Rachel. So then they get to know each other, and following kind of what is the next step in Rachel's life and how does Alex get involved, and we are following a romance that happens. Really, really loved this book, and the friendships, like Rachel and her girlfriends, Alex and his best friend, and then the relationship between Alex and his sister. I loved this book. Okay, then we have question number 4, a book starting with the first letter of their name. So my mom's name is Maureen, so an M. So, More Than Words Can Say by Karen Whitmire. This is book 2 of the Patchwork Family series, but it can be read as a standalone. We are following Zach, who we do meet in book 1, but we don't know a ton about him, and as I said, it can be read as a standalone. There is a marriage of convenience that happens, and it is set late 1800s? Yes, 1896. And so I really, really enjoyed this one, and this is on my list to reread this year because I remember enjoying it so much. Okay, then my mother-in-law's name is Ruth, so a book starting with R, and Relative Justice by Robert Whitlow. I didn't even think about the 2 R's actually. That's funny. So in this one, we are following basically a law family. We've got a father and a son who run a law practice together. And then we have another son who is married to a lawyer. And when a health crisis happens for the father, the son and daughter-in-law, who are off in another city, come home. The daughter-in-law steps into the firm and starts working with her brother-in-law to kind of keep the firm going, and they follow a case. Meanwhile, we are also following the daughter-in-law basically coming to Christ and learning about Jesus and learning about God, and I really loved following the family dynamic of this, and I was invested in the case that they were investigating and defending, but I really liked seeing the faith aspect of this story. Okay, then question number 5 is a book character that reminds you of them. Okay, so for my mom, I'm going to say Gracie from Trial and Error by Robert Whitlow. And I remember when I first read this, I made him think, oh, my mom does that. So Gracie wakes up every morning and does her devotions first thing in the morning, and then she has a prayer journal where she writes down people's names and things to pray for. And then she goes through that journal every single morning as part of her devotions and prays for them. And I remember my mom very, like, every morning doing devotions. And my mom, again, is very good about keeping track of who she's praying for or being intentional about praying for people in her life. So that was the first book that I immediately thought of. Then for my mother-in-law, the book I thought of was A Twist of Faith by Pepper Basham. This features, we're following two characters, Mrs. Mitchell's son and a lady. I couldn't even tell you what the book's about offhand. It's been quite a few years since I read it. But the character that made me think of my mother-in-law is Mrs. Mitchell, because she just welcomes everybody into her house and makes them feel as part of the family, and just very upbeat and outgoing. And she's like, oh, come for dinner. Come, doesn't matter. And that is my mother-in-law. Just very, doesn't matter what the meal is, she will make room for them at her table and just invites everybody over. And her house is open to everybody. Okay. Then question number 6 is a book with something in it that they love or love to do. My mom is originally from Yorkshire, England. And obviously Yorkshire has her heart. It's where she grew up. That's where most of her family still is. And British in general. So really, I could probably pick any book set in Britain, which could be probably why I really like books set in England as well. But the one I'm going to mention is All Creatures Great and Small by James Herriot. So this is the box set with all of them. Yeah, there's all of them. And so I remember watching All Creatures Great and Small, the TV show, growing up with my parents. And I remember going and visiting the set where it was being filmed in Thirsk, England. And so this is the one that I immediately think of when I think of my mom, is her love for Yorkshire and just British stuff. Okay, then for my mother-in-law, we share a love of coffee. So I immediately thought of this book. So this is The Solid Grounds Coffee Company by Carla Lorando. This is book 3 in the Supper Club series. I have not read this one yet. It is on my list to read, but she loves coffee, and we share that love of coffee. And I remember going over to her place quite a bit, and every time, as soon as you walk in the door, it's like, do you want a coffee? Do you want a coffee? And she is one that's very intentional about buying me the coffee that I like for, like, Christmas, my birthday, whatever. Like, she knows that I really like pumpkin coffee or maple coffee, and so so that is for my mother-in-law. Number 7, a book you have enjoyed or think you would enjoy together. Okay, so for my mom, that was really easy. We talk books quite a bit, pass books back and forth quite a bit. But the one book I immediately thought of was No Ocean Too Wide by Carrie Taransky. So this one starts in Britain, travels to Canada, and on a ship. That's how my mom traveled to Canada when my parents originally immigrated to Canada. And when I read this, I knew that my mother would love this book. And this is one of my favorite books. I have read it twice, and I would not be opposed to reading it again. And my mother read it, and she loved it as well. I knew she would. So yes, No Ocean Too Wide by Carrie Taransky. Okay, then for my mother-in-law, I immediately thought of Stormy Lake by L.D. Stoth. So this is a local author to me. This is somebody that actually my mother-in-law knows. And I remember when this was originally released, I now have my own copy, but when it was originally released, my mother-in-law had a copy, read it, and then gave it to me, and I read it. I loved it. We both really enjoyed it, and I had to purchase my own copy. And so yeah, this is the one. This is Campground. This is book 1 in the Campground Mysteries series, and we are following Maya, and Carly who go camping for a week, and stuff happens at this campground, and they end up becoming friends with the park superintendent, and another one of the co-workers, and we're just following the friendship and relationship bloom between one of the guys and one of the girls. And I really enjoyed the story, and because it had the mystery aspect of it and kind of the suspense and the danger happened, I was really invested in the story. Again, this is another one that I have read twice because I just really enjoyed it. Okay, then book number 8. A book you'd recommend or have recommended to them. Well, as I said, me and my mom talk books quite a bit, recommend books back and forth. So a lot of my books I have loaned to her. A lot of my books my mom has read. So I had to find one that I've read fairly recently that I haven't had a chance to loan to her yet. And that is If I Were You by Lynn Austen. I think she would really enjoy this one. Again, it is set in England. It is historical, and does have a little bit of romance in it, but it's really more about the friendship between the girls and the girls kind of surviving, like kind of working through World War II. Yes, I'm pretty sure it's World War II. And so I think she would really enjoy this one. And this is my very first Lynn Austen book that I've ever read, and I really enjoyed it, other than the ending left me wanting more. But I just haven't read book 2 yet. I will. Okay, then for my mother-in-law. This was a little bit harder because we don't talk books a lot, but I do know that she likes suspense and has read, I want to say, Terry Blackstock, Dee Henderson, and Irene Hannon, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Yeah. I remember going over to her house one time, and I remember there being a book sitting like on a bookshelf right by the door, and I said, oh, that's a really good book. And I remember her saying, yes, I'm really enjoying it, I'm keeping invested. I just don't remember what that book was. I want to say it was a Dee Henderson or an Irene Hannon book, but I don't remember. But I do know that she likes suspense and stuff that keeps her invested. So the book that I would recommend is Aftermath by Terry Blackstock. In this one, we are following characters from a bombing happens, and then somebody gets arrested on suspicion of being the bomber. But we are also following somebody who was at the concert that the bomb happened at, and she escapes, but her friends do not. So then it's kind of dealing with the aftermath of that. And then we are following the guy we learn very early on that he is being framed for it, but can get out, and why is he being framed and everything. I just very, very invested. It keeps you guessing, but I love how it has the suspense side of things, but then we're also following the emotional journey of the one that was at the concert and all the aftermath of what they're dealing with. Really, really love this one. Again, I've read it twice. That means I really enjoyed it. Okay, question number 9 is a book they recommend or choose for you to read. Okay, so the book that my mother has most recently recommended to me is The Gold Digger. Can't even really see the title on that. The Gold Digger by Liz Tolsma? I don't know. I've never read this author, but my mom said she picked this up and started reading, and she could not put it down. She was so invested in it. Okay, so in 1907, shy but loyal Ingrid has traveled from Norway to support her grieving sister Belle, who owns a farm in Indiana. Well-to-do widow Belle, who has lost 2 husbands and several children, provides Ingrid with enough money to start a small business. But Ingrid is confused by the string of men Belle claims to be interviewing for her next husband. When Niles comes to town looking for his missing brother, who said he was going to marry Belle, Ingrid has a sinking feeling her sister is up to no good. Just how many of Belle's suitors are missing, and why? So this is part of the True Colors series. I do know it's not book 1 in the series, but I do know also that, because I've read book 1, I do know that each book is considered a standalone. It's just they are considered a series because The True Colors is fiction based on strange but true history. And so we are following the missing men. What happened to them, and is the sister involved in it? And so this is the book that my mom most recently recommended to me because she said she could not put it down and read it in 2 days, which is very unusual for my mom to read something that quickly. So yes. And I do not have a book from my mother-in-law because, as I said, we don't talk books a lot. I don't see her that often, so I don't know what she would recommend or even what she's read very recently. Okay, then the last question number 10, is a book showing strong motherhood. This one stumped me for quite a while because I'm like, I don't know of a lot of books that have strong mothers, and I'm sure there's a ton out there. I just can't think of them off the top of my head. But one that I did think of was Embers in the London Sky by Sarah Sundin. So this is a new release. It just came out earlier this year, and we are following the main lady character, Alida. I've never known how to say her name, but she gets separated from her son, and then in Germany, and arrives in London. She knows that her son was headed that way, and she does all she can to try to track down her son and find her. And so this is the one that immediately came to me. But I know there's a couple of, I just finished reading The British Booksellers by Chrissy Cameron, and that one features a mother and a daughter who are fighting to save their bookstore during the midst of the beginnings of World War II. Those are the two that come to my mind with a mother, but I'm gonna say this one for now because this is kind of the one that I think of. She's fighting to find her son and will do whatever she can. Okay, so those are the 10 questions for the Mama Bear tag, and just some books to kind of honor my mother and my mother-in-law. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video today, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.